I will call this meeting of the Albemarle County Historic Preservation Committee to order. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20A14 and ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Opportunities for public access to this meeting are posted on the county's website at the county calendar. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. Both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. Please note that this online meeting and any associated chats, including chat comments directed to individual members, are a public record and are subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. Thank you. We do have a quorum present. Our first item of business is announcements. Our next virtual meeting is scheduled for December 28th, and we should discuss whether or not that's going to be possible or likely. How do people feel? In the past, we have often canceled that meeting because of the proximity to Christmas. It is 3 days after Christmas, so I don't know what your suggestions might be.
I'd be
Don't
available.
all speak at once. You would be there?
I could be available. Sure. I think we have a lot. You know, we're working on a lot of stuff.
I'm a little less certain if I could make that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'll make myself available. I can come.
Betsy?
I might not.
You're muted. Betsy, you're muted.
I don't see any problem.
Okay, so that's 3. Diane, you can be there?
Yes.
Ross?
I can be there, need be.
And Ed?
I might not be able to be there. I have to talk to my wife. Yeah, about where we're going.
Okay. So there are 5 of us that definitely could be there, and Nancy possibly could be there. What do we think? Shall we try to do this? If we have a quorum, Margaret, is that acceptable, do you think, to you and to Carolyn?
I will be here for sure. And
vacation, but I'll be at the meeting and I will show you beautiful Idaho. Which is why I'm going on vacation for Christmas to visit my son and his family. But yes, I can do it. The 28th is no problem.
All right. Well, it sounds as though we probably could hold the meeting, and as Liz has said, we do have a lot to go over. So shall we proceed then on that basis? Then the next meeting will be a virtual one and will be held on December 28th at 4:30 p.m. Thank you. Approval of minutes for October. Are there any changes? If not, I'll accept a motion for approval.
I move we approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of October for the committee. There's no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We have a presentation today to start about overview for conservation easements. And I believe Scott is going to do that if I'm not mistaken. So Scott, just take it away.
Righty, thank you. Let me just share my screen real quick. Hopefully that'll work. All righty, so everybody can see the presentation screen?
Yes.
Good,
Yes.
thank you. All right, so a few months back, there were some questions from some members of the committee about what was permitted on a particular property that appeared to be under conservation easement. Now, it turned out that that property was not itself under easement, although it was under the ownership of someone who did have a county purchased ACE program easement. And so it still seemed useful after we talked about it to come back to the committee with a presentation about the basics of conservation easements and some information about easements in the county and the county's own easement programs, just to increase your familiarity a little bit if you are less familiar with these. And then what I hope to do is go through this fairly quickly just to get the basics out of the way and then leave some time for questions. So I'll just dive right in and then hopefully we'll have some discussion time afterwards. So what is a conservation easement? It's a voluntary permanent agreement between two parties, a landowner and a conservation organization. It doesn't change the actual ownership of the land. It does change who has rights over certain uses of the land. The landowner can keep the land, retains ownership, can sell the land if they want to, but from then on out, the holder, the grantee, has rights to enforce the restrictions of the easement, which might be subdivision, limits on house sizes, prohibitions on destruction of historic resources, requirements to maintain riparian buffers. There's all kinds of things. So that's basically what it is a court-recorded agreement between two parties. Each one is unique. Everyone has restrictions that are based on the specified conservation values of the property. So people will often ask, what's permitted under conservation easements? And you have to look at the document for each one to be sure. And there are many different types of conservation easements or easements with certain goals, usually dependent on the conservation goals of the holder, the body that holds the easement. There are farmland preservation easements, which are aimed at maintaining agricultural land. There are purchase of development rights easements, where a locality often will pay a landowner to put their land under easement and lock up essentially their ability to subdivide and develop the land in order to maintain a rural area. There are working lands easements that allow agriculture and forestry. There are historic preservation easements that focus on the structures and landscapes of the property, but might say a lot less about subdivision and things like that. There are environmental focused easements that try to look at protecting habitat, protecting wooded areas, things like that. There are riparian easements that only apply to the portion of the property within a certain distance of streams. And there are combinations of all of those. Everyone can be unique, so there's no single answer about what an easement does. So these days in Albemarle, we have over 100,000 acres of the county protected under conservation easements. That's about 24% of the rural areas. But protected has many different meanings. Again, there's different kinds of easements that do different things. One thing it doesn't mean is that the property has to stay exactly as it is. Every easement allows some form of use. Most easements allow residential use. Some allow some degree of subdivision, usually with very large lots, or allow a new dwelling to be built. So again, it's a complex question of what's permitted. Just to break it down a little bit, the Virginia Outdoors Foundation is by far the largest holder of conservation easements in the county, as they are across the state. And it's a long-running state-established agency that has been the leader and the largest holder across the state for a very long time. What people often don't realize is that Albemarle County's easement programs, which I'll break down in more detail in just a minute, actually are the second largest holder in the county and probably the largest locality-run easement program in the state of Virginia. There are also several other agencies and organizations that hold easements in the county. You can see them all here: Nature Conservancy, Department of Forestry, Piedmont Environmental Council has a few. We've got 11 Department of Historic Resources easements that will be of particular interest to this group. Land Trust of Virginia, Soil and Water Conservation District does mostly those riparian easements I mentioned. There's even one DCR easement. So wide variety of organizations working across the state and in Albemarle. I just wanted to point out on the map here, the green areas are the conservation easements, and the brownish areas are the designated historic districts in the county. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of overlap, maybe not as much as we might like, but there's quite a bit of overlap between the historic districts and the permanent conservation easements, which is a good thing. So to break down the county's own easement programs, there are 3 different kinds of easements that we work on, and I'll explain those in more detail. There's the ACE program, which I mentioned previously, and which was the subject of the original question that brought all this up. The Albemarle Conservation Easement Authority, which is our easement holding body. It's an authority appointed by the board. They take donated conservation easements, and then there are the preservation tracts of so-called rural preservation developments, which we'll talk about each of these individually. So the ACE program is a purchase of development rights program. It uses public money from the county to purchase conservation easements that retire development potential on land. These are generally speaking farm and forestry kind of easements. They limit subdivision either entirely or to a very large degree, and they tend to eliminate a large number of dwellings in the rural areas. Because it's a public funded program, it has a very rigorous scoring process and assessment process so that everyone knows the money is being spent well. The highest ranking candidates on the scoring system are the ones who get the first offers for purchase. The program does focus on working farms and land under threat, so it's looking mainly at landowners who have more land than cash, more land than income. They are people who are considered to be the most under threat of having to sell their land for subdivision at the next financial emergency. So the way that works is the offers are prorated by income as far as the purchase price. Okay, the easement authorities donated easements. These are for people who can donate an easement on their land, who want to protect their land permanently. These are voluntary easements. The easement authority has its own acceptance criteria. It's not a scoring system like the ACE program, but they have a list of resources they want to protect and density standards and things like that to make sure they're doing a good job of protecting the land. And that's been a growing program over the last 10 or 15 years. And then the last one are the rural preservation tracts. So-called rural preservation developments are an alternative form of rural area subdivision. Instead of carving up a property entirely into residential lots, some small, some large, the idea is that all but one of the lots get crammed together in smaller lots, and then the remaining piece is put under easement so that it's permanently protected. You don't actually restrict the amount of development that way, but it does affect the form of development. And the county does take on a permanent obligation in making sure that that remnant piece is there and protected properly. I think the original idea was that landowners could sell a portion of their land for development and then keep the largest remaining piece as their working farm. It doesn't often work out that way, unfortunately, but that was the original intent. There are very detailed ordinance criteria in the zoning ordinance about what the design standards are and how those developments should be laid out. So, and again, see back here, I just wanted to show the acreages of those 3 types. So we've got 181 easements, can be more than that soon, over 28,000 acres that are the responsibility of the county and of the easement authority to take care of, to monitor and watch over time. So that's a quick overview of easements in Albemarle, but I did want to leave some time for questions and discussion. So I'll be happy to take any questions that you all have if you'd like to hear more. And I'll stop sharing the screen for a while.
asked this in the chat, but Scott, is Bundoran Farm an example of a preservation development tract?
No, it's not. We actually asked them to do it that way originally, and they declined. And so that development is a unique combination of by right subdivision development and a bunch of private covenants. Really, there's no separate holder. It's a set of private covenants that they aren't conservation easements. So it's really complicated. They laid out that several subdivisions in a really complicated way and then placed their own agreements over the open areas.
Okay.
Other questions for Scott? I think this is a very useful presentation, and I thank you for it. It's a good thing to be able to look at these various types and their definitions. I think there's a good deal of confusion about them in many cases, and I think it's good to get that cleared up.
And if any of you all ever have a question, sure.
Could you go back to the first map where you showed the historic and the farmland?
Sure, hang on just a moment.
Number 5, I guess.
Oops. That was not what I meant to do.
So I'm just curious, you know, there's this aggregation of historic, I guess I'll call them easements in the brown, the historic districts as you're calling. And then the green, you know, is, you know, very kind of spotty and fragmented across, when perhaps, you know, an important aspect of that would be that they would be more connected together. Does that make sense, the conservation easements? Is there any kind of idea, like a goal or a direction that the county would seek in terms of where it would like more of these? Or is it just simply, you know, hit or miss and whatever comes the county's way?
That's actually a really good question, and something that comes up not only with this program, but with several of our conservation programs. People say, why is it so scattered? You know, agricultural and forestal districts have the same question. You have all these weird little districts that are scattered across the landscape. That's kind of the game you have to play when it comes to a voluntary conservation program. These aren't lands that we have designated for protection. These are lands that people have voluntarily placed protection on. So what the agglomerations you see are where there are communities of people who live in important places who all know that they have something important to protect. And often an easement in one place will encourage other landowners around it to do the same. Right. People seem to feel like they can reassure each other that they're not planning to develop, and there gets to be a bit of community momentum about it. But in the past, you know, the question was, does the county have a direction for where these ought to go? In the past, we really didn't. Unfortunately, the county's comprehensive plan, which covers the rural areas, and you'll see on the map there's the white background, which is the rural areas, and there's the light gray around the city and to the east and west here, the development areas. We've always tended to treat the rural areas the same. They're all just designated the same thing in the plan, but I think the historic preservation plan, which talks about these districts, and then more recently the biodiversity action plan, which laid out 3 priority areas in the county that most needed protection. So we are starting to get more direction about it, but we don't really have the staffing to kind of chase people down. We're still dependent on people coming to us or to the other easement holders to initiate these actions, which is something, you know, I hope we can move beyond that and get to a more proactive, I can't believe I just used that word, a more active, targeted way of getting some of these easements in place.
Related to scoring criteria, at all? Like a parcel's, whether or not it's a historic district, is that reviewed as part of the ACE?
The ACE program, well, again, it's reactive. We're waiting for them to come to us. But once it does come to us, there's a long list of criteria about everything from the development potential on the acreage to frontage along highways and scenic roads to stream length to high quality soils on the properties. That's a very strictly laid out program as far as how the individual candidates are ranked. The donated easement program is similar in that it's looking at many of the same resources, but what we tend to say is we want you to hit a certain number of resources to be protected depending on your acreage.
Are historic districts part of that scoring?
Yes. Well, I know they are for the donated easements. I would have to go back and look at the ACE ordinance to see if they are or not. I believe they are, and Margaret may remember, but I've just blanked on whether that's one of them. It's easy to look at. Okay.
You can also, one important factor is you can ease a property more than once. So there's certain layers of additional easements that could be placed on a property.
That's true, and that does often happen with the historic preservation easements. When I was doing some research earlier today on this, you could see where there were land conservation easements, usually with Virginia Outdoors Foundation, that were in place, and then the historic preservation easement was overlying or underlying that on exactly the same property, and they just do different things.
Are you seeing an increase in people who are volunteering to put their lands in easement, or does it just hold steady or declining, or?
The ACE program is kind of dependent on funding. So as funding has dropped off with various financial crises in the last several years, we've been able to do less, but there are still some interested candidates out there. With the donated easements, it's been steadily growing for several years.
Right.
And I think last year was our biggest year ever.
Mm-hmm. Are there news stories that are running and talking about this?
There are some, and again, with our limited staffing, I mean, we have for our conservation easement program, there's less than one person total, but if you divide it up between us working on all of this. So, or maybe one person's worth. We unfortunately haven't had the staffing to make it as big a deal about promoting this as we have. But in the meantime, other organizations, especially the Piedmont Environmental Council, are out there doing that very actively. And we are moving toward doing that more actively. And we're in the middle of working on it now, trying to find more ways to promote our own programs, both what we've done in the past and try to draw more people in to do more of these easements. Mm-hmm. Something we just need more capacity for.
Other questions for Scott?
There are no programs, though, within the county that would enhance specific goals of historic preservation regarding like the use or change of a structure, right? I mean, that's going to be a very specific historic preservation written grant, as opposed to maybe county programs seem, correct me if I'm wrong, more land and environmental conservation.
That's very true. Our existing conservation easement programs have been largely focused on limiting development and protecting environmental resources. As Margaret said, there are points in the ACE program for being in historic areas, but that's not in itself, a strong historic preservation program. The easement authorities, easements in a few cases will have no willful demolition types of restrictions on historic structures, but not the really high level of protection and standards for renovation and things like that you would see in a true historic preservation easement. So no, we haven't done much of that through the county's programs, the county's land conservation programs yet. Don't know if that might change.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. If there are no further questions, we appreciate your input. And I assume that the material that you've been showing us would be available to us online or through email or something like that?
I can easily send you the maps and the stats.
Okay.
About the programs.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. If you'd send them to Margaret, I think she could take care of forwarding those to the group.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. We have two regular discussion items today. One, I'll let Margaret start with that, is the Purvis store in Easement.
Yeah, this will be quick. I just wanted to mention that I had some email correspondence with Peggy Denby, and I think she had come to the committee previously to discuss her interest in Easement. And she indicated that Friends of Easement held a fundraiser. They raised funds to purchase the historic Purvis Country Store building. They're now waiting to get clear title before they close. But at that point, they'll be owners of the property. And her question is, how should she work with the Historic Preservation Committee as they move through the long process of restoring this building? It sounds like they don't quite know where to begin. And they don't have a lot of funding to do the work that needs to be done. So I'm wondering, maybe we can have one or two members contact Peggy and just see if some conversations can take place. And I know we're somewhat limited in what we can do, and we certainly don't have any funding to offer, but maybe some members would be interested in getting in touch with her.
Right, I think they have a long road ahead of them because they don't have much money, and the building, I think, is probably going to require a great deal of work in order to get it restored. So that's one thing, and as you say, we don't have any resources, especially financial ones, to offer. I think that to the extent that it would be possible to meet with her and perhaps a couple of other people down there and the Friends of Easement. If you haven't looked, by the way, at their website, I would encourage you to do it because there is a good deal of information about it and photographs of the store and so on. But it's in pretty bad shape, and they are going to need help.
Could you tell us what the website is called or how to look for it? Just a keyword.
Look for it under Friends of Easement, and I don't have the thing off the top of my head, but that'll if you Google Friends of Easement, that should bring you their homepage.
Okay.
Well, as a preservation standpoint, you certainly want to start with a good, with the roof, so to protect everything underneath it. So I think that's when you have a very small budget, that's pretty much the first place I think to make sure secure.
Rob, would you be interested in contacting Peggy? And
sure, send me her information. I'd be happy to do a walkthrough with her.
Okay. The website is actually www.friendsofeasement.com.
Okay.
Might ask in advance. I believe she's got some kind of a preliminary structural engineer or at least some quotes from roofers. They were looking at stabilizing the roof. I mean, she's aware of the roof need. That might get you started. It's in the southern rural Albemarle Historic District, correct? It's in Easement.
She's also mentioned that they've made an Easement history book. They've completed that, and that will be available in the next week or so.
Right, which will include information about the store. It isn't an individually designated building, but it is in the historic district for Southern Albemarle. It would be good if they had it individually designated, but that's another process that will take time and money.
Is that the only structure on the property?
There's a small shop.
There is another small building. I don't remember the details. I looked at it a couple of days ago online. That website will be somewhat informational. Scott, Ross, if you would be willing to talk with Peggy, I think that would be a nice beginning.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Liz and Chris have put some links in the chat. The one
right.
links to the Purvis store says the estimated cost is $300,000. Okay.
Okay.
I will forward you Peggy's information, Ross, and I will let her know that you'll be contacting her.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, and keep the rest of us up to date, Ross, as you talk with her.
Will do.
Thank you for doing that. The next item on our discussions list is an update on the County Historic Markers Project, and I think Liz has some information she wants to share with us.
Yeah, yes. Let me put the slides on. I don't know if that's a full screen or not, but can you guys see those?
Yep, that works.
I don't know what I did now. Okay. So just wanted to give a quick update, just to remind everyone, Nancy, Diane, and I have been tasked with researching and kind of continuing to explore.
Liz, excuse me, you might want to go back to that previous format, because at least on my screen, I'm getting nothing but black.
Oh yeah, it says sharing is paused. Okay, how about, let me get out of that full screen node.
Yeah, I think that was the problem.
Good. Now I can't see you guys, but whatever. Okay. Sorry about that. So I sort of have three things to talk about. One is just to introduce folks to what types of markers we've been talking about. Not that there aren't other types, but just for the sake of this conversation, to sort of get us all on the same page in terminology. Let's just say there are three types of markers. We know what state highway markers are. They are reviewed by the Department of Historic Resources, and they in particular have to be of state or national significance. There are, gosh, off the top of my head, maybe 30 something state highway markers in Albemarle County. And when we were approached by the Board of Supervisors via the Office of Equity and Inclusion, maybe a year and a half or so ago, the task, or at least the challenge, I think, issued to the Preservation Committee was to expand our inventory of markers in regards to stories of women and people of color. The state highway marker process, though, is pretty onerous and primary source documentation and maybe isn't best suited for what we are more interested in, which is stories of local importance. So there is when we talk about local markers, kind of, yeah.
I just want to say, if you're working off of images, we're not seeing anything right now.
Jesus Christ. All right. Well,
I think if you do it again, yeah, there you are.
There we go. There we go.
So the state highway markers are the kind of standard gray markers, very standardized. Local markers, it's not entirely clear to me whether these would still require DHR review. I know that our current local marker is under review by DHR, and I'm thinking maybe that has to do with anything that's put into the VDOT right-of-way requires review by VDOT or so it's sort of a hybrid. It does go through DHR, but the standards are not so, the review of it is not so rigorous. And then there is another type of marker, which is not, now get off of the road typology and imagine more of a type of sign that you would see in a park or along a kind of more pedestrian friendly experience, and that we can call that a wayside marker. So 3 types of markers, just, sort of want to start with that overview. The next thing I want to update folks on is where we are in our research. We've been reaching out to existing local marker programs like Fairfax County and Prince Edward County and learning a little more about their program. The things we're interested in and sort of is what type of markers do they focus on, if any, how do they engage and solicit input from the community, and then just some budget numbers too. And that's been interesting and ongoing. Diane has been in touch with Fairfax. I think Nancy says she has a call in or a message in to PE.
Prince William.
Mary Lipsey has a well-established Civil War Trails program. And I spoke with her and she's more than willing to come share that information with us. But in terms of a program that focuses on contextualized history, women, African Americans, they're pretty much at the same place that we are, whereby they're still, trying to determine who's going to write content or provide the historical context to the marker and those types of things. So, they are pretty much a work in progress as well.
And Fairfax has a a lot of information about their program and even different pathways for folks to figure out if they think, let's say someone in the community has an idea, you can kind of see, okay, is this worthy, worthy isn't the right word, but is this more applicable to the state program, the local marker, or the wayside? And so there's a lot of good information on their site, and I think they could really be a resource. And then I just want to also update that we've been in touch with possible partners or at least other folks in the community that have possibly similarly aligned goals. So the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society assisted us with helping draft some of the text for the initial marker, which is now under review for Virginia Lee Murray. And I spoke with Tom Chapman earlier today, and he's interested in the idea possibly of assisting with research in, a future endeavor. So that leads me to the final slide, which is to pose some questions for us as a committee to consider moving forward. And really that's to gauge to what degree we are interested in continuing to explore this idea of a local marker program. Not even, I'm not exactly ready to offer a recommendation to a type of program or a variety of, types of signs and markers. But, if we keep going down this path, we can continue to learn more. And if and how, and, while we do that, we should be thinking about how we would structure that proposal to the board, and perhaps re-engage Siri. And, this was a project that was initially brought to the committee by her office. I think it warrants, checking back in and making sure we would still have her support moving forward. And then finally, just, maybe want to talk about what we might do with this existing list that we drafted that have some possible topics. But just to remember that those topics came from the committee, and the goal for the program, I would think, would be that the topic ideas are more organically solicited from the community. So I welcome any thoughts, and Diane and Nancy, let me know if I missed anything.
No,
and ultimately, an important part of this will be financial support of some kind, both in terms of county staff, whether or not Siri and or Margaret or anybody else in the county will be in a position to work with us on that, as well as knowing how to proceed in terms of what it will take to produce funding for additional markers.
So my feeling, and we can certainly get confirmation on this, but my feeling from what I've heard from Siri is that the board is interested in these markers, and so there is funding there. I think you should not count on any county staff support at this point in time. We are it's just not
overwhelmed.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get to a point somewhere in the future where we can are better able to assist with that type of work, but right now it's just not possible.
Well, so one thing too, I mean, and I think we can push, we have some good information, and I don't know how much time we want to take up today, but, an interesting model that to consider coming out of Fairfax is that their committee there is really just sort of the compiler of marker ideas, including even text. They vet it. It's maybe perhaps ranked or evaluated through a criteria that they've set up. And then, in the case of Fairfax, I believe they have a matching funding, structure.
50%.
Yeah. And so there's funding options. There's also, kind of who's doing what questions. But I think that's an interesting model in which some of the heavy lifting is happening from not within staff and not within necessarily the resources committee. And that was especially why it was exciting talking to Tom about how if a community member or organization is very excited about something, they could possibly work with the Historical Society staff to research and develop text, using the resource that's within our own community, and then, submitting that through the county marker process. So I thought that sounded like a really great, sustainable model.
Tom Chapman is here as an attendee. If you would like to ask if he'd like to add anything, I've moved him over.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that just came up on the screen. That unmute. It's like Zoom telling me something. No, I had a great conversation with Liz earlier today when we were originally approached by Siri to help with creating the original marker text, and then connecting into all of you through a Zoom meeting afterwards. I realized that we were kind of late in the process of where we were coming from. But I think with community engagement and an interest on the part of the community, it's more of, I think, the county advertising this as an option and then having maybe a grassroots effort within these various communities, such as Easement and what they're doing down there, that we would definitely be in a position to facilitate and help research and help kind of point them in the right direction with you all on the county and the resource preservation level, being able to kind of say, well, we agree that this is a great opportunity and or a appropriate thing to mark, and then we go from there. So it's we're all into wanting to participate in this community work.
That's really exciting. This is Nancy Takahashi speaking. I wasn't a part of the conversation, but Tom, just because I just don't know this, could you just talk about what is the staffing and the resources of the Historical Society, just so I can get a sense of the scale of, you know, people that could be working on projects?
Okay. Yeah, currently I have 2 full-time staff. I have a librarian who is provided through Jefferson Madison Regional Library, and then 2 part-time folks on an administrative and a collections management level. When I brought in that full-time staff person this past or a few months ago, he was the one worked primarily on the markers because you know, I couldn't pull myself away from just everything else going on. But moving forward, part of his job is not only programs and projects, but also volunteers. So we're gathering a great deal of volunteer effort too. So there's folks such as Miss Denby down at Easement that I actually got a email today for her book and other things that she's got going on. So, you know, somebody like that, or, you know, we can look at the community that on a temporary basis can participate, and we can kind of at least vet the process, if not do all the work per se. So I think there's a lot of different ways in which this can be approached without having to rely completely on county or us or anyone else, but it can be a shared process.
Fantastic.
Anything further for Tom?
No, thanks, Tom.
Yes, thank you very much. Liz, do you have anything further that you'd like to add at this point? We're not going to be able to discuss the details in any length today, but how would you suggest that, what would you like to see happen next?
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, whether it's through Margaret or I'm happy to myself, I'd like to reach back out to Siri and just sort of see what what she's thinking about, what her priorities are for next year. You know, this would be great if it was a project or program that was supported through OEI, but in my opinion, I think we want to really fine tune what it would be, or craft it in a way that it's something like very, you know, pretty like we have some of the details worked out, so it's not a strain on resources. It's something that can really hit the ground running and align with the goals of OEI, and maybe that would help in our funding. And so long story short, I don't have anything else for the group, but maybe we can just, again, continue to talk to other localities. And if other folks on the committee have ideas or want to be, you know, part of that conversation, let us know, and we'll loop you in.
Liz, I have a question for you. When you said you were hoping that the program would be something that could be supported by Siri's office, what did you mean?
Well, I believe that when I don't know how the funding necessarily would work, but it was my understanding through a previous conversation that, you know, she sort of had access to a budget line within, you know, the county. And
that's the clarification I needed. I didn't know if you were saying funding. I think, yes, you're right on the funding, but if it was, you know, like actual working on the markers and that sort of stuff, that's a definite no as well.
No, we want to make it really easy to get support. So having a well-crafted program idea would be important. But to check in and make sure we're on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'd just like to add, if anyone on the committee has any experience with other local sign programs or an example of a sign that they've seen that could become a model, I think it's really open-ended. You know, what is this sign? What might it look like? How might it look different from the state markers? Because for me, the state markers, the problem with it, they said they're so limited in content and what you can say. And they're not really, you know, beyond the physical sign, it's not even connected to something else where you could find some more information. And those kind of possibilities, I think, are out there, you know, especially now. And so if anyone has any ideas on it, I think it would be great for us to hear that.
I think that, Liz, your third category of signs does allow for considerable flexibility in what is included on the signs and how it's portrayed, how it's presented. And that might be an important thing to look at. Again, those would not be signs that would be in the right of way, but that's actually not a bad thing either, because it means that people can actually stop and investigate the sign at some length and see what's there. It also might provide the possibility of leading one to additional information elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for letting us.
I think it'd be helpful. I think it'd be helpful to know a little more about where Siri's office stands and the types of things that she can help us with on this matter in more, a little more detail, a little more specificity.
I would like to know
if that's possible.
If they've done any needs assessment surveys to query the community about such an interest in a program. That's going to need to be done.
Right. Right.
That has not been done.
It hasn't. Oh, it needs to be done.
Great. Yeah, I agree. Is there anything further, Liz, that you want to say about this at this point?
Nope.
All right.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you very much for your work. Moving ahead to work group updates, demolition and documentation. We received a demo report and we know that there's one building that needs documentation out in the Batesville area. I believe it's in the Batesville. No, that's not quite right. It's in Western Albemarle. I forgot. Huh?
Free Union?
Say that again.
Free Union.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, Free Union.
It's Free Union, but it's much further up than Free Union.
Isn't it Boonesville?
Right.
Boonesville.
Right.
It's between Free Union and Boonesville.
It's near Boonesville, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
But it looks like you have the first one, Chris gave us. That particular building, I don't think needs to be done. But the other one, which was a number 2 on your list, is the one, is the Whitehall one that should be done, I think. Did you get my last message, Chris?
Yes. Did you see the most recent, I think Liz saw it because she commented on, but the most recent attachment that aerials of all the demo properties on the list?
Well, right. The first one you gave us was not the same one that Ross was talking about, but the Ross one was the one that was number 2 on your list, I think. And what would be really helpful is to see pictures of these buildings rather than just a list of them. this is one we wouldn't want to do, I don't think. The one you have up now.
Right.
I don't see any reason to do that myself. I mean,
no.
I would agree.
I updated it because DHR, somebody surveyed it in the 90s, and they consider it a contributing resource to the property. But it does have documented photos of it.
Okay. But there's another one that was number 2 on the list.
This is the one I believe you're referring to.
That was the one that,
That one should be documented, I think.
Okay.
I agree.
Why is one more worthy of documentation than the other? They look kind of,
the second one looks older by far.
Yeah.
And
also, the first one has had some documentation already as part of the larger historic district. I don't think this one has.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in
VCRIS
for a deep.
Architecturally, this one is of considerably greater interest, and as Ed says, it's considerably older.
And this is the one I think Ross was talking about originally. Is that correct, Ross?
Yes, that's correct, Ed.
Yeah, okay. Because the one we were looking at first, we thought was it, but it isn't. It was the other one. So what I'm trying to say, though, is that all of these, if there was time, and I guess there might not be time to do it, but when we get these messages of a list, it would be nice to see a picture on each one.
So let me just sort of jump in and say, I think we possibly missed a couple of the follow-ups on some of these demolition applications that came in the past month. But under normal procedures, everything that shows up on that demo report, the demolition subcommittee should have already been familiar with, right? So if it was something that was questionable or definitely needed to be documented, we would have contacted the demolition subcommittee to say, hey, here's this thing. Do you think it needs to be documented? If so, let's arrange.
Well, we don't always see pictures.
But what I'm trying to point out is, of the list we just got, as an example, the one we thought was the Whitehall one that Ross was talking about wasn't it. And the only way we knew that this was the right one, I went online and did an aerial and looked at the thing, and then I got one in the mail then too. So that was the only way we knew that this. Otherwise, we would have missed this one, quite frankly.
Well,
I'm wondering other ones.
It takes us back to what we were trying to do previously and have this as part of the process of the demo permit to provide a front elevation or a side elevation with the demo permit. And I think, Ed, that would solve our problem where we would get the list with the pictures.
That would be a big help, but if they don't, I was just wondering if we only had four unit buildings anyway, usually to look at. If I don't know whether the staff has enough time to just go and show one of these pictures. Otherwise, we would have missed that first one, quite frankly. If it wasn't for Ross saying there's an old building at Whitehall to be, and then I went and found this one, and it wasn't the one that we were first talking about. That's all I'm trying to tell you. We would have missed. Right. We would have missed that. I'm wondering if we missed other ones in the past.
That's the role of the documentation and demolition committee, though, is to do that review. It's not fair to ask the staff to take that kind of time, and that's exactly why this committee exists, is to be able to look through those four, resources and have that
we should do that
and work all that out. And here we are.
So let me try this again. So as the month goes along, each of those 4 permits would have been looked at by me or by Chris. And if it's something like, if it was a building that was built 10 years ago and they're taking it down now, we're not going to bother the demolition subcommittee with that. We're just going to say, we know that need to be documented. If it's something that's 200 years old, we're going to say, and we will have figured that out by either looking at aerials or going into VCRIS and seeing what's already been surveyed. And that information goes out to the demolition subcommittee and we say, hey, here's a building that needs to be documented, we think. Do you agree? And if so, then we contact the property owner and try to get that set up, right? If it's somewhere in between there, then, you know, it's somewhere in between there. We try to figure out if we think it's worthy or not. We'll send the email to the subcommittee and say, hey, what do you think? And we try to send that information with the location and a map. And if there's an aerial, maybe whatever we can find, spend a minimum try to provide some information so that the demolition subcommittee can say, yes, we think it needs to be documented, or no, we don't think it does. And we are looking to the expertise of the subcommittee members to you know, help figure that out and to know more than we do about the properties in the area, because you all just know more than we do. And so we're really looking to you for that help. So really, when we get to this point, and that demolition report is sent out, you should all, the subcommittee members should already have known about what's on that list. The things that should pop out at you are things that somehow got missed. They never came to historic preservation for review. Or you might be surprised to see other things on the list, but they shouldn't be historic because they would be the ones that we've already just said, you don't need to look at them. We're just signing off on this permit. So something went wrong this month. We've missed a couple of things. It may be because just things are a little crazy right now. We will try to do a little bit better, but we shouldn't, that demolition report shouldn't be coming with a whole list of things that you've never seen before. And I'm talking about the subcommittee, other committee members possibly.
And I would add that seeing that report doesn't mean they've been signed off on yet either, possibly. So there's still time there. It wouldn't be as a miss because there'd still be time possibly to document it before demolition.
Right. The lists are coming very close to the meeting time.
Yeah, very close.
More closely than used to be the case. And I didn't get mine till this morning. And that has been frequently what's happened over the last 6 months or so. And it'd be helpful to be able to have those a little bit sooner.
We can ask the person who has set up that reporting system to see if they can have the cutoff be a week earlier, or how much time would you like?
A couple.
Well, I mean, even a couple of days would be helpful.
Yeah.
So we have time to research it a little further.
I always look them up, but today I was on the road all day, and so I didn't have a chance to chime in. So at least a day or two.
Right.
But didn't we
I think that would be helpful.
Didn't we also hear the suggestion, I think it was from Ross, that in the submission, they provide just some simple photographs of the front of a couple of the sides of the building?
That would be awesome, but
they have iPhones, it's like nothing to be able to just walk out, snap a picture, walk around, and it would just then save the staff from so much work.
We haven't been able to make that a requirement.
You haven't?
We have not been able to make it a requirement.
But could you make it just a request, a strong, a recommendation, or just put it in those terms?
Yeah, save time on their end as well.
Yeah, it could. We'll need to ask to see where that suggestion would be based, because I'm not sure how the applicants are, but I'm not sure how that will work, but we'll look into it.
I mean it really to save you all the time. And
no, I know.
Especially on a tight
I want it to be a requirement. I'm just in the way that the applications are made. I'm just not sure where an applicant will find that suggestion. So I need to go.
Well, if you found out, maybe I'll think about, Margaret, how we could help support you and your staff, you know, in carrying that message. You know, and we don't, the process and the ways in which things get changed or amended, and
or not.
sympathetic to that.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it has to be more than 3 days before the meeting. I think it has to be a week.
Well, you all decide what's the time.
How about with just coordinate, I guess, with the agenda deadline? It just because the agenda is Wednesday, or 3 days before. That
leads to a point of, would it be possible to receive an agenda as a committee member in advance of a meeting? We don't currently receive them. They're posted, but they're not received.
No.
Well, sure. Yep.
That would be helpful.
So
you're going to document this one building, I assume, right? Right. The one up near Boonesville, is that correct?
Right. Yeah. I'll send an email reaching out to the owners.
I think that'd be worth it.
Just to close the loop on that, is 1 week a reasonable request working internally for the demolition reports?
A week is certainly enough for us to, for me or for Chris to just forward that email to you. I have no idea what's involved with changing the report that's done. It's an automatic thing. I have no idea how that works, and there's somebody else that's in charge of that. So
separate.
Imagine they just go in and change.
So you can look into that, Margaret?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
List.
All right. Yeah. If we could get a week, that would be great. If not, you know, several days would be helpful, whatever can be worked out.
Sure. I want to go back to the agenda question. So we can email you an agenda. With other groups, what we've been changing to is providing the link to the website where you go to the calendar page and you just check on the agenda there. Okay, so
that'll work.
That'll work.
Okay. And does everybody know how to get to that calendar page and where the Historic Preservation Committee information is? Sort of, yes. Is there anybody who know? Okay.
What do you mean by the calendar page?
It is.
What do you mean by the calendar page? You're talking about the meeting page. That calendar page.
I'm talking about the county's website, where you go to the main page and you scroll down to the calendars, and all the meetings are listed there, and you can go in and click on it, and then you have access to all the information related to that meeting. Have you tried that before?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Oh, that should work fine.
Okay, so the meetings are typically both the agendas and the related information are typically posted the Wednesday before the actual meeting. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're aiming.
That should be fine. That should be fine.
That would be great. So what does it mean now that we've said that building needs to be documented? What does that actually, is that something?
The standard procedures for that are Chris or I will contact the property owner to see if they are willing to have committee members come out and document the property. And then if the answer is yes, then try and figure out when.
What's the form of the document, assuming they say yes, what's the form of documentation that's sought? Just photographs or?
Well, it's
reports or?
Photographs. If it's a really important building, then possibly more than that.
I see.
It's generally up to the people who are, the committee members who are doing the documentation.
Okay.
Can you just clarify for our minutes what that particular one is, what property that is that wants to be documented? What the address was?
It's a free union address. I'm not sure what
it's number 2 on the list. So the
6889.
Put it up on the screen. Can you put it up on the screen or not?
6889. Got it.
Yeah, 6889 Free Union Road. And then to add Ed's question about 1634 Rural Pocket Lane, that was a question from a potential owner, if you recall, in October that was inquiring about financial resources available. And that particular house is outside 2 historic districts. And Ed and I believe Ross indicated interest in helping out to see if they could add their property to either, or maybe as a local, like a state historic resource to get financial, be able to get financial money. But I think Ross said to hold off until the sale actually closed. And then I was keeping track of it, but I didn't realize it was a land. It was considered a land sale, not a property sale. So I didn't get the email notification that the sale actually went through. So that's why I was sending the email it ended up going to the whole group, but send the email to kind of remind if you were still interested in me reaching out to the new owners to see if you could help them along with documentation of the property to confirm. I think the date in our GIS map had put it at 1700s, but I know those are quite often wildly off.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to go by there and take a look at it.
Okay, I'll go ahead and send an email then.
Okay.
Tomorrow, reaching back out to the owners to see if they would be willing for some committee members to meet and see the property.
Okay.
If it helps to have a person, I'd be happy to go out there as well.
As Margaret says, I think it's two or less.
2, yeah, no more than 2 people. Yeah.
And while we're on that topic, let's just also try to keep in mind that email conversations, depending on the timing of them, can also constitute a meeting. So let's just watch that email conversation. If you want to provide staff with information, we can then process that and send it back out to the group. And that's the best way to make sure that we're meeting all public meeting and FOIA requirements.
Seems like it makes the work of a subcommittee nearly impossible. And I just wonder if what we're doing is above board, then why is it even—
I've been just emailing away, then I'm violating every rule in the book.
Subject to FOIA, which everything is subject to FOIA when you're in a government. Why should that be, you know, wouldn't that just be appropriate that we just know that we're subject to FOIA and act accordingly?
No, there's actually a requirement. Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, it may be time to have someone from our county attorney's office to come and talk to the group again. The issue that I'm referring to now is we don't want conversation of the group, of the committee, and the appearance of decisions being made an email conversation that is not open to the public is just, it's not what's supposed to be done. So maybe it's time to have a refresher from the county attorney's office next time. What do y'all think?
Wouldn't that be specific to applications or things under review and not necessarily, you know, a
Research on local marker programs.
You know what?
I don't think it matters.
I don't think it matters. I think it's business of the committee, business of a board appointed committee. But I will love to turn these questions over to the county attorney's office.
When was the last time? It hasn't been that long since they were here to talk with us about this very problem.
They did talk about ago, I think, about this problem, did they? It seems I did.
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't recall. So
it hasn't been that long, but certainly we could do it again since there seemed to be some confusion still about it. But this is a fairly strict guideline, and I think we all need to be very careful about how it's done.
I can share with you, and you can actually find it at our website. There is the county attorney's office has a land use law handbook, and
that's right.
So I'm just going to read two statements from there, and one is members of public bodies must avoid engaging in interactive group email and other real-time electronic communication discussions with other members concerning official business of the public body, especially where responses are exchanged immediately between 3 or more members. So it's that immediate aspect that's important. You can go into this land use law handbook and do lots of reading about lots of detail and on and case studies there, where perhaps when the responses, when they're further apart in time, it's less of an issue, but it's that immediate thing that's a problem.
Would you send that link out for the committee?
Sure.
That'd be helpful.
What is considered official business of the public body? Because it doesn't seem like a potential project or, you know, educational program or something that's not, like I said, an application under review, I understand, but I don't know, that seems particularly difficult for us to even do anything.
I mean, I would point out
the bad part is that when we're doing documentation, if it's a big building and all, it would be nice actually to have 3 of us go out there.
Forget you can do that. You can do it if it's advertised ahead of time. That's all. It just needs to be
advertised. But I don't quite understand. Do other counties do this? Have a rule like that? I mean, it just seems ridiculous. Well, I mean, I think the rule is for other things, but for what we're doing, it doesn't seem to be appropriate. But
well, we have asked the specific question before. We've been told that it does apply. We can all ask the question again. And
I know we've gone through this before. I remember.
Yeah.
But it just seems like a ridiculous sort of situation to me. But I mean,
well,
for 3 of us go out to look at a building, I think it'd be also educational if 2 of us went out to measure, and new people on our board could go along and like they used to before we got in trouble doing it, I guess. It's a good learning experience for them.
It's a great learning experience, and we can still do it. We just need to.
It can be done if it's public. It can be done if it's publicly advertised. That's really the issue.
Mm-hmm. And that's a matter of just notifying Margaret in advance, Margaret and Chris in advance.
Yes, what constitutes public advertisement?
And we pass the information on to Carolyn, who posts it at the website. It's a certain time period. It's at three business days ahead of the meeting.
Okay.
Right.
Website. Yep.
Well, if you can resend that handbook, maybe we can do a little refresher and then follow up with possibly the county attorney if needed. Sorry.
Yeah. I think that would work well. And it may be something that we will want at some point to put on a future agenda for further, more detailed discussion. Are there other work group updates? How about questions? New owners of historic properties, threatened properties to watch.
Threatened properties. I heard that the wonderful store behind Piedmont store in at the corner of Whitehall and Sugar Hollow Road may be in a threatening position. It's a house that's attached to the very old store that Joe Jones owns. I haven't heard anything more about it, but I heard some talk that he may be thinking about taking that building down, and I'm staying on top of it.
Good, excellent. All right, is there anything further we have for today? If not, we will see you all hopefully on the 28th of December. And in the meantime, I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving and stays safe and healthy. And this meeting is hereby adjourned.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, everybody.